Details are very sketchy at this moment. We don't know precisely what happened. We don't know the sequence. First of all, the president is safe.
Safe, yes, but not okay.
Reagan starts complaining of pain in his back and his chest and his side. Not feeling so good.
And just then, I coughed. And I had a handful of bright, red, frothy blood.
On the day of March 30th, 1981, an incident would occur that would send the USA into panic over the shooting of the beloved 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, and with the extremely close call of death that the 40th President of the United States was nearly fated to, the extremely sick and twisted individual who was almost responsible for this act has quite the extremely interesting story known as John Hinckley Jr. So without further ado, let's take a look into this disgraced man to truly understand his disturbing legacy. Born on the day of May 29th of 1955 within the small city of Ardmore, Oklahoma, this day in Ardmore, Oklahoma would not last for long for the young John Hinckley Jr., along with the obscurest history of the Hinckley family as it is. At the age of 4 years old, John Hinckley Jr., along with the Hinckley family, would move further down south to the vastly large and more fundamentally conservative city of Dallas, Texas. It would be within this stay in Dallas, Texas, John Hinckley would spend his younger years of the ages of 4 years old to 18 years old. Within the year of 1973, John Hinckley Jr. would graduate high school and in turn be able to do whatever he desired in life, along with John Hinckley Jr.'s family reportedly owning an oil company known as the Hinckley Oil Company, would really leave John Hinckley in a position in his life that he would not need to work a lot due to the fact that he could easily live off of his family wealth for the time, along with the Hinckley Oil Company and the John Hinckley's family reportedly moving to the Rocky Mountain state of Colorado, while remaining in Texas, attending Texas Tech University. Within the years of 1974 to 1980, John Hinckley Jr. would continue his life as an on and off college student, while also growing quite the love and passion of becoming a songwriter. So come the year 1975, after dropping out of college, John Hinckley would move to the city of Los Angeles in hopes to achieve that dream. And although John Hinckley's efforts were notable, making it into the big leagues of becoming a songwriter in the vast yet ruthless city of LA would prove to be a bit too much for the 20-year-old John Hinckley. So after being low on money, following this failed venture in John Hinckley's life, Hinckley would reach out to his wealthy family about his recent misfortune in hopes to get sympathy, as well as to of course get funds. With interestingly enough, and almost disturbingly at that, John Hinckley would often talk about his girlfriend, known as Lynn Collins. However, this supposed girlfriend of John Hinckley would prove to be just a fabrication in John Hinckley's mind, likely representing and developed by John Hinckley's extremely alone and terrible time that he was experiencing in Los Angeles, as well as representing his underlying psychosis that he was developing. But come the over a year and a half later, in September of 1976, John Hinckley would relocate to the small town of Evergreen, Colorado, where his family resided in. But just months earlier, in February 9th of 1976, a movie would be released, known as Taxi Driver, that the 21-year-old John Hinckley Jr. would take extreme obsession in, more specifically, with a certain 13-year-old actress in the movie, known as Jodie Foster. With oddly enough during this time frame, it would be reported that John Hinckley would start to gain quite the interest in guns during this time frame of the 1970s, with reportedly often taking his new weapons to shooting ranges and practicing with his guns every chance that John Hinckley could get. This, of course, could all just be chalked up as extreme coincidence, but when you consider the fact that the plot of Taxi Driver is based off a seemingly slowly detached from reality taxi driver who gains an extremely negative hero complex, where in turn plots out and even attempts an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate for the time, known as George Wallace, were which 4 years previous, on May 15th of 1972, that very thing would happen to presidential candidate George Wallace, who would be shot multiple times as a result, but would miraculously live and even make recovery for his extremely near-death experience. but with the price of him never being able to walk again, where with this assassination attempt on George Wallace in the movie, main character Travis Bickle would focus his attention on saving the 12-year-old prostitute known as Iris, or actor who plays her, Jodie Foster. My point is, with all of these similarities and real-life coincidences that were all going on during this time, all connected with, or involving John Hinckley Jr., from his clear psychosis to his extreme obsession with not just Jodie Foster, but even the Taxi Driver movie as a whole, that we often see John Hinckley Jr. trying to replicate in his real-life actions is definitely a red flag that his family and friends should have seen coming from well over a mile away. But with doctors reportedly prescribing and giving John Hinckley Jr. antidepressants and even tranquilizer medications to deal with his extreme emotional problems would be an excuse not to worry about him. Nevertheless, it's very debatable on if John Hinckley was taking his meds, but what's clear is that for years on end, John Hinckley's extreme obsessions would roll right over into the year 1980. And what's so important about this year that you might be asking? Well, for some of my younger audience out there, might need a bit more context to truly understand what was going on during these times, from reported gas shortages and spikes all going on at the same time to extreme terrorist uprise that would occur at the U.S. Embassy in the Middle East, resulting in the capture of 52 U.S. citizens that would have occurred just months earlier in the year 1979. So come the year 1980, with all these crises both occurring in the Middle East and in the United States, would spark and cause extreme inflation, basically meaning that the price of everything is going up. And with the now very disliked president of the time, Jimmy Carter, either not doing anything to resolve these problems or make them worse, such as Carter putting sanctions on Iran for not helping in the effort in freeing the captive Americans in their country, but would just end up screwing over the US more due to the fact that the vast majority of our oil comes from the Middle East, especially from the country of Iran. And overall around this time, Jimmy Carter and his administration was constantly dealing with non-stop controversy, regardless of what he did or didn't do. Before the USA, change was thankfully destined to come that year in an every 4-year process known as an election, and out of the vast candidates who were in this extremely important election, Ronald Reagan would prove to be the undisputed frontrunner for not just the GOP, but even the vast majority of the election season, especially as over time, Jimmy Carter had decided to make more unwise decisions and eventually nothing at all. So on the day of Tuesday, November 4th, 1980, the 1980 election had been commenced and declared, and early on, Ronald Reagan had won the 270 needed electoral votes to become President of the United States, and after a reported 2 months of transitioning administrations from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan, on the day of January 20th of 1981, Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as 40th President of the United States. And although things weren't perfect at first, or even for a while, following Reagan's landslide election, within the hour of Reagan being elected as president, the Iranian hostages were freed, while also going side and side with an almost overnight rebound in the US economy. Things were looking bright for the US during this time, thanks to basically the automatic actions of the 40th President of the United States. But within all this prosperity that the USA was receiving, John Hinckley Jr.'s obsession with Jodie Foster would finally reach to an extremely psychotic level, with on the day of March 30th, 1981, at the Washington Hilton in Washington, D.C., as a way to finally get the attention of Jodie Foster by attempting to make history in the act, John Hinckley would be in the crowd of onlookers viewing President Reagan's escort out of the Hilton, but as we would soon learn, with much more devious and malicious reasons on his visit to the Hilton that horrific morning. Following the attempted and nearly successful shooting of Ronald Reagan, along with the injuries of multiple law enforcement and administration workers, John Hinckley was immediately placed in custody as a result of his atrocious crimes. But unfortunately, after Hinckley shot a Secret Service agent, law enforcement officer, and White House worker, Reagan was within those who were injured in the attack. But thankfully, after an extended recovery time in the hospital, Reagan and the others attacked by John Hinckley made a full recovery, except James Brady, White House press secretary, who had been paralyzed in the attack and had passed away in 2014, arguably due to his injuries he had sustained over 30 years prior. But for John Hinckley Jr., with the US law throwing the book on him as a way to make an example, as well as to make sure he stays off the streets for good, would do just that. But oddly enough, with all these federal level charges being thrown at John Hinckley Jr., was found not guilty on reason of insanity, and were soon being placed in a mental institute. John Hinckley Jr. would spend almost 40 years in treatment, being rehabilitated. But come September of 2019, after going through lots of court proceedings and battles from his lawyer, John Hinckley Jr. would finally be unconditionally released from all court-ordered treatment and rehabilitations that for the past few decades he was constantly receiving, and would be able to live the rest of his life as a US citizen. So with this newly founded freedom that for decades on end John Hinckley Jr. didn't have the rights to, on the day of November 2nd of 2020, the John Hinckley YouTube channel would be created, with after a month of the channel being dormant, on the day of December 11th, 2020, John Hinckley would release his first music video on the site called John Hinckley Sings Original Song. And overall, through the entirety of the 2020s, John Hinckley has been inconsistently uploading on his YouTube channel throughout the years, with as recently as of December 3rd, 2023, John Hinckley would upload his latest music video called John Hinckley Sings Lonely Dreamer Original Song. And overall for John Hinckley, it's definitely very interesting to think on how far he has come in his overall life by this point, especially with him finally pursuing a career that for seemingly decades on end he always wanted to pursue. But just looking at Hinckley's overall channel analytics says a lot on the overall support he gets, with around 35,500 subscribers and 1.5 million views at that. Is definitely interesting to say the least. But with the real and main reason that Hinckley gets so much attention on his channel is just the overall weight his name and image carries. But with the vast majority of comment sections on his channel videos being disabled is both strange yet understandable at the same time. With the comment sections that he does have turned on is often riddled with troll comments, or even disturbingly enough, seemingly true supporters of John Hinckley's channel. But just looking at John Hinckley's overall music career is very interesting at that, such as in January of 2022, when John Hinckley Jr. was starting his own music band, when Hinckley making a call out for musicians to join. This is only one of the many projects under John Hinckley's music career, but I definitely think it's very interesting on just how in the first place Hinckley got here in his life. And overall, looking into the life, legacy, and legend of John Hinckley Jr. is an extremely interesting one at that, from his early years of being such a great student that had seemingly no problems whatsoever, to his later years in life when Hinckley was trapped in California, failing to pursue his music career that arguably contributed and led to Hinckley's overall delusions and crazy mindset that he was developing around this point. But for years on end, Hinckley wasn't getting better and really mentally worsening, as such his extreme obsession with the movie Taxi Driver and the plot of it, that both John Hinckley Jr. and the main character of the movie both share in common from their mental illness, with just like the movie, on the day of March 30th, 1981, things would come to a head in a very deadly way that in John Hinckley's mind was all to impress the seemingly obsessed love of his life, Jodie Foster. This of course is only a synopsis on how he got here in life, and has disavowed his older self, but a truly interesting deep dive into his psycho I don't think we have ever quite seen before. With that, I've been Skipperson, and I hope y'all have a great day.